mahogany boardroom. A group of executives laugh as a woman belittles her own husband for being just a lowly IT guy. Cameras flash as her powerful lover, the CEO, smirks. Suddenly, the nobody calmly places a folder on the table and every phone in the room lights up with alerts. Billions in assets shift. The man everyone mocked is, in fact, the hidden owner of the company, and tonight he's done hiding. Chapter 1. The Nobody at the Party. Crystal chandeliers glittered like frozen fireworks above the grand ballroom of the Vale Cross Corporation's annual gala. Every inch of the space dripped with excess. Champagne pyramids, a live string quartet, imported orchids woven into silver arches. The air buzzed with chatter, deals, and carefully manufactured laughter. At the far end of the room, unnoticed by most, stood Ethan Vale. His black tuxedo was perfectly tailored but deliberately understated, a conscious uniform of anonymity. In one hand he held a glass of sparkling water, in the other a small tablet he'd been using to quietly monitor the company's live financial feeds. People brushed past him without recognition, the way they might brush past the waitstaff. Vanessa's laughter sliced through the din. She stood at the center of a circle of executives and influencers, her sequined gown catching the light like shattered stars. Next to her, Damian Cross, the CEO, draped an arm across her shoulder with proprietary ease. Cameras flashed. The scene would end up on society pages tomorrow. Power couple at the helm of Vale Cross. "You should have seen Ethan trying to fix my phone the other day," Vanessa purred, loud enough for the circle to hear. "My husband, the IT guy, always tinkering with gadgets." The crowd chuckled politely. Damian smirked. Ethan felt the words like small, sharp pebbles thrown at his back. He took a slow sip of water. On his tablet, a notification blinked. Transfer complete. Came in account. He closed the screen. A younger executive leaned toward Vanessa, stage whispering, "Does he even know what we're planning for the merger?" "Please," she said, rolling her eyes. "Ethan still thinks this company belongs to his grandfather. He wouldn't understand the strategy even if we drew it for him in crayons." Laughter again. Ethan inhaled once, steady. For a moment he thought of the first time he'd met Vanessa, how she'd been the only one to see him, truly see him, before all the layers of disguise. The memory flickered like an old photograph, then faded under the harsh light of betrayal. Clara Morales appeared at his elbow. "Sir," she said quietly, "your car is ready. The data room is live. We're on schedule." Ethan nodded. "Thank you, Clara. Enjoy the party. Tomorrow everything changes." He set down his untouched glass, adjusted his cufflinks, and took one last look at the crowd. He wasn't angry anymore, just resolved. They saw a nobody, an invisible IT man clinging to the edge of their world. They would soon learn whose world it really was. Chapter 2. The Web of Betrayal. Rain lashed against the windows of Ethan's penthouse office, 50 floors above the city. The room was a study in contrasts. Sleek modern furniture, floor-to-ceiling glass, and along one entire wall, shelves of dusty legal tomes and bound ledgers inherited from his grandfather. This was the real heart of Vale Cross, not the glittering ballroom Vanessa and Damian had claimed as their stage. On the large oak desk, a digital blueprint glowed. Clara stood beside him, arms folded, eyes hard. She had been with him for 10 years, first as an assistant, then as a strategist, and finally as the only person who knew the truth. "They're moving faster than we expected," she said. "Damian's already signed the preliminary documents for the offshore merger. Vanessa's name is on half the paperwork." Ethan scrolled through the files, his jaw tightening. "And the others?" "Your so-called friends on the board, 2 have already sold their votes. Another 3 are in negotiations." Clara slid a USB stick across the desk. "We intercepted their messages." He picked up the stick, turning it in his fingers. "They think they're stealing the company from a man who doesn't exist." "You've hidden too well," Clara said quietly. "They don't see Ethan Vale. They only see the ghost you've built for them." That's exactly what I want. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. Tonight they see a ghost. Tomorrow they see the man who owns them. Clara hesitated, and Vanessa. For a heartbeat, the facade cracked. Ethan stared at the rain. She chose her side. She thinks I'm some mild-mannered tech analyst. She doesn't know about the private equity network. She doesn't know about the silent shares my grandfather placed under my control. She certainly doesn't know the offshore trust just acquired Damien's largest creditor. Clara raised an eyebrow. So when the trap closes, everything collapses at once, he said. Damien loses his liquidity. The board loses its votes. The merger collapses, the SEC sees their back-channel dealings, and Vanessa's lover loses everything he promised her. Outside, lightning forked across the sky. Ethan's face was lit white for an instant, then shadow again. They think betrayal is a one-way street, he murmured. They're about to learn otherwise. Chapter 3: The Wife's Plot. Vanessa adjusted the diamond studs in her ears and smoothed the silk of her cream-colored blouse. The gala was in full swing, a dazzling display of wealth, power, and influence, exactly the playground she thrived in. Her laughter, light and practiced, echoed across the marble floor, a sound meant to charm and distract. Damien, ever the eager co-conspirator, hovered close, whispering about his latest deal and how Ethan had been conveniently absent from the financial meetings that mattered. Vanessa smiled, her eyes scanning the crowd, as if she were hunting for her next opportunity or her next victim. Ethan never did like these events, Damien whispered, grinning. He's always the quiet one in the corner, you on the other hand. Vanessa's smile widened. Oh, I thrive in the spotlight, and really, Damien, it's about showing who's in control. She glanced toward a group of key investors near the stage. They need to see confidence. They need to know I and the right alliances are the future of Vale Cross. She had no idea that Ethan was already several steps ahead, watching through the very network of cameras and financial trackers she had scoffed at months ago. Her miscalculations had been glaringly obvious, yet she didn't suspect a thing. Ready? Damien's voice was low but sharp. Vanessa nodded. Together, they approached the small cluster of investors who had been crucial in the takeover scheme. Her voice carried perfectly, smooth, measured, confident. You know, Vanessa began with a playful tilt of her head, it's funny how some people let sentiment cloud their judgment. Some people, despite knowing the numbers, just freeze. She looked past Damien, her eyes narrowing slightly as she added, unlike certain analysts we know. Poor Ethan, always so cautious, always so quiet. A few polite chuckles circled the group. Damien's smirk widened. Vanessa's ego swelled. She thought she had finally humiliated the man who had quietly risen in their shadow. But Ethan wasn't in the shadows tonight. From across the room, the lights dimmed just enough for a subtle shift. A hush fell over the crowd, and then, through the venue's high-tech audiovisual system, a calm, commanding voice filled the room. Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps you've been misinformed about who really controls Vale Cross. Vanessa froze, her confident grin faltering. Heads turned, Damien's eyes narrowed, and at the back of the room, Ethan stepped into the light. Not the timid analyst she remembered, not the man she had disdained. This was Ethan Vale, the billionaire, the architect of her world, and the one who had orchestrated everything she thought she controlled. Ethan, Vanessa whispered, the word more a gasp than a question. Yes, Vanessa, he said, stepping forward, a quiet fury in his calm demeanor. It's been a long game, and tonight your judgment, your underestimation comes to its consequence. On the big screen behind him, financial charts and documents flashed, revealing the truth about Damien's debts, the board members, secret dealings, and Vanessa's own backroom schemes. Investors gasped, murmured, and pulled out their phones. The facade Vanessa had carefully constructed crumbled in real time. Her face drained of color. This isn't possible. Ethan's eyes, once gentle and reserved, now burned with quiet rage. You thought betrayal was simple. You thought a charming smile could hide deception. But I never underestimated anything. And you, Vanessa, underestimated me. Damien's confident posture faltered. Investors whispered, questions mounting, their admiration shifting instantly. Vanessa tried to rally, to inject charm, to spin excuses, but the room's attention was no longer hers. Every laugh, every nod, every whispered compliment she had gathered over years evaporated in a flood of shame. And yet, Ethan remained composed, letting her unravel before the very people she had used to elevate herself. The unfaithful wife who had once wielded power over him like a weapon was now exposed, powerless and utterly humiliated. And as the camera captured every reaction, the shock, the betrayal, the disbelief, Ethan's revenge had only just begun. Chapter 4: The Calculated Strike. The gala had barely ended, but the ripples of Ethan's revelation had already spread. By morning, social media feeds were flooded with screenshots, clips, and whispered speculation. Vanessa's careful reputation, meticulously curated over years, was now a target of ridicule and disbelief. Ethan, however, didn't rush. Revenge, he knew, was an art of patience. He watched from his penthouse, overlooking the city skyline, letting the city's pulse sync with his own methodical heartbeat. Every move he made, every disclosure had to strike precisely. Step 1: Control the narrative. He called his trusted PR strategist, Lena, into his private office. Her sharp eyes and strategic mind had been his silent ally for years. "We'll start with the board and investors," Ethan said, handing her a folder thick with financial missteps, secret deals, and documented betrayals. Everything Vanessa and Damien did, the debts, the secret clauses, the illegal maneuvers, they'll see it all. And it'll come from a place they trust, the company itself. Lena nodded, already typing, already orchestrating. Within hours, carefully drafted emails, official notices, and press statements had begun circulating. By the end of the day, Damien's name was tied to failed ventures and high-risk loans. Vanessa's influence in the company was questioned openly, publicly, and in every corner that mattered. Meanwhile, Ethan moved to his second strike: family. His parents, who had once celebrated his humility and modesty, were now confronted with a stark truth. Ethan was no meek son quietly following the family legacy. He had been building, accumulating, learning, and preparing. And now, their complacency had blinded them to his genius. Vanessa had assumed that humbling Ethan publicly would diminish him. She hadn't considered that he had already rewritten the rules. Step 2: Reclaiming control. Ethan met with key executives one by one over private lunches, confidential calls, and discreet meetings. He wasn't angry, he was terrifyingly calm. "I want transparency," he said, presenting charts and forecasts. "I want clarity, and I want accountability. Every statement is measured, every gesture intentional." By the time the week ended, Vanessa's allies, who had quietly resigned, had been reassigned to inconsequential positions. Damien's deals were frozen, his leverage gone. Vanessa, once bold and unshakable, found herself packing her apartment at night, phone in hand, desperately trying to call board members, investors, anyone. But Ethan's influence had already revealed itself in his story. Her charm, her manipulations, her lies, they no longer carried weight. It was then that Ethan took the most personal step, confronting Vanessa directly. He arrived at her penthouse, not as the man she thought she knew, but as the embodiment of her worst fears. The man who had been underestimated, mocked, and disrespected was now standing in her living room, composed, impeccably dressed, radiating power and command. "You underestimated me," Ethan said simply, voice calm but steel beneath the surface. "You thought charm, beauty, and gossip could define me, but every slight, every humiliation you inflicted has been catalogued, and every misstep of yours is now public record." Vanessa opened her mouth, but no words came. She had rehearsed apologies, explanations, manipulations, but he didn't give her room. Step 3: Exposure. Ethan revealed the final blow, a dossier, complete with financial proofs, personal indiscretions, and her meetings with Damien. He handed it to her silently. The weight of her failures, compounded by his careful strategy, pressed down like a physical force. By the time the board reconvened, Vanessa was nothing more than a shadow of the woman who had once ruled the room. Damien's career was effectively over, and Ethan, the man they had all underestimated, had reclaimed every ounce of control, not with anger or public spectacle, but with meticulous precision. He didn't celebrate, he didn't gloat. Revenge, he understood, wasn't about spectacle. It was about justice, about balance, about making those who had scorned him face the consequences of their arrogance. And as he walked through the corridors of Vale Cross, the company buzzing with renewed respect and loyalty, he knew the final act was near, the moment when Vanessa would realize completely the depth of her own miscalculations. Chapter 5: The Public Reckoning. The morning sunlight spilled over the city like a warning. Vanessa woke to a flood of notifications, emails, social media alerts, and whispered phone calls. She stared at her phone, her carefully constructed world crumbling in real time. Every image of her success, every public compliment, every nod of approval was being rewritten by a single, unstoppable narrative: Ethan. He hadn't needed to shout or threaten. Every financial move, every secret disclosure, and every calculated contact he had made in the past week had been quietly orchestrated to converge today, the day Vanessa would face the consequences in public. The company's annual shareholder meeting had been scheduled months ago, but Ethan had ensured that every key figure would be present. Investors, executives, and media representatives, all would witness Vanessa's fall from grace. She tried to compose herself, straightening her designer jacket, rehearsing explanations she knew would fail. But deep down, she already knew. The dossiers, the leaked emails, the financial audits, Ethan had thought of everything. When Vanessa walked into the grand conference room, heads turned. Whispers filled the air as the board members exchanged knowing glances. Damien sat beside her, attempting to feign confidence, but even he could sense the shift. Ethan entered moments later. He didn't rush. He didn't glare. He simply walked to the podium, exuding an effortless authority that silenced the room. No one questioned who controlled the narrative anymore. It was him. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady and unyielding. "We are here to discuss the future of Vale Cross, and as you will see, the past must first be reconciled with the present." He clicked a button, and the first slide appeared on the large screen behind him. Detailed charts of mismanaged funds, secret off-the-books transactions, and unauthorized deals. Each entry was accompanied by timestamps, signatures, and emails proving Vanessa's knowledge or deliberate ignorance. The room went silent. Vanessa's hands trembled, her mind racing for excuses, for lies, for any shred of control. But Ethan had anticipated everything. "You see," he continued, packing slowly, "success is not measured by charm, by manipulation, or by appearances. It is measured by accountability, by transparency, and by respect for those who trust you." Slide after slide, he revealed Damien's collusion, Vanessa's indiscretions, and her repeated attempts to belittle and humiliate him in private. Every insult she had hurled, every underestimation, every betrayal was meticulously documented. By the time he reached the final slide, Vanessa's facade had crumbled entirely. Her carefully maintained smile vanished. Damien's face mirrored her shock, powerless in the face of undeniable evidence. "And now," Ethan said, his voice lowering, "you must face the consequences. Not in whispers or behind closed doors, but here, in front of everyone who once believed in you." He handed printed copies of the dossier to each board member, investor, and attending media outlet. Phones recorded, cameras flashed, and the ripple of Vanessa's downfall became instant, undeniable. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Her attempts at charm, her practiced deflections, even her tears. Nothing could undo the meticulous orchestration of her humiliation. Ethan paused, letting the weight of the moment sink in. The once proud woman who had mocked him, dismissed him, and flaunted her power in his face was now reduced to silence. Every investor she had impressed, every colleague she had manipulated, every friend she had betrayed, all saw her as she truly was, flawed, reckless, and utterly defeated. The meeting concluded, but the damage was permanent. Media outlets picked up the story within minutes. Headlines screamed across financial news platforms. Veil Cross scandal, CEO's betrayal exposed by hidden benefactor. Social media exploded with reactions, opinions, and analyses of Vanessa's downfall. As Vanessa retreated to the confines of her apartment, alone and humiliated, Ethan stood atop his office tower, watching the city stretch below him. He felt no elation, no gloating satisfaction. Revenge, he reminded himself, was not about cruelty. It was about justice, balance, and reclaiming the dignity that had been stolen from him. And now, with the public reckoning complete, Ethan could finally breathe, knowing that every betrayal had been accounted for, every insult repaid, and every lesson delivered in the most effective way possible. Chapter 6: The Quiet Rebirth. The days after the shareholder meeting passed in a surreal blur. The media frenzy had settled into a steady hum, the kind that never truly goes away. Headlines faded, but the memory lingered like a stain. For Ethan, the whirlwind was not over. It was only beginning, but in a quieter, more deliberate way. Veil Cross's board had demanded immediate restructuring, and Ethan's fingerprints were on every decision, every change. But instead of public theatrics, he moved with precision, guiding the company with a steady hand. Old alliances were replaced with new ones, partners who understood integrity and foresight, not charm and deception. In the quiet of his office, Ethan reviewed the final documents, each signature representing a regained foothold, each number a measure of restored balance. He allowed himself a small smile, not of triumph over Vanessa, but of relief that justice had been served without compromising his own principles. Vanessa had disappeared from public view. Rumors circulated. Some claimed she had fled the country, others that she was negotiating quietly to save her reputation. But Ethan paid no attention. He did not need her downfall to define him. The act of reclaiming what was rightfully his and exposing the truth without descending into petty cruelty had already spoken volumes. Even Damien had retreated into the shadows, his ego bruised and influence evaporated. Ethan had no desire to humiliate him further. Their defeat had been public and complete. The lesson had been delivered, and the world had watched. With the company stabilized, Ethan finally allowed himself to consider life beyond the empire he had rebuilt. He revisited friendships he had long neglected, reconnecting with those who had supported him silently during the years of his hidden identity. These were relationships built on trust, loyalty, and shared history, not opportunism or greed. Late one evening, as the city lights shimmered against the horizon, Ethan walked through the quiet streets, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He had been betrayed, underestimated, and dismissed, but he had emerged unbroken. His wealth, his power, and his reputation were restored, yes, but more importantly, his sense of self was intact. In the solitude of his penthouse, he allowed a rare moment of introspection. The victories felt hollow without someone to share them, and yet he had learned that true satisfaction came not from vengeance alone, but from reclaiming control over his life and decisions. Every calculated move, every patience-driven strategy had led him to this moment of quiet clarity. He remembered the faces of those who had mocked him, Vanessa, Damien, even colleagues who had whispered behind closed doors, but he did not feel anger anymore. Anger had served its purpose. Now he felt only resolve, clarity, and a profound sense of freedom. The empire he had nurtured in secret was no longer hidden. Veil Cross thrived under his direction, ethical and unstoppable. Investors saw the numbers, competitors saw the strategy, and the public saw only the rising star of a man who had once been underestimated, but never again. Ethan's journey was far from over. There would always be challenges, new rivals, and unforeseen obstacles. But he had learned the greatest lesson, that power wielded with wisdom, patience, and integrity could achieve more than wealth or vengeance alone. As the city pulsed beneath him, Ethan finally allowed himself to breathe. The secret billionaire had reclaimed his life, restored his legacy, and proven that no betrayal, no matter how deep, could define his destiny. And in that quiet rebirth, Ethan realized the most profound victory of all. He had emerged not only unbroken but unshakable. The world had witnessed his revenge, yes, but it was his transformation, his discipline, and his unyielding integrity that would echo far longer than any scandal or humiliation. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story as much as I enjoyed sharing it. If you want more thrilling tales of secrets, revenge, and unexpected twists, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for the next story. Your support means the world.